This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks and Carasoft. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, a new blueprint for the future of cloud security, the keys to success for your agency's cyber future, and the roadmap for tomorrow for FedRAMP. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. The federal government has a new roadmap for the future of the cloud security program, FedRAMP. It's already hitting some of the marks that roadmap calls for, including opening up applications for an agile delivery pilot. Drew Myklegard is Deputy Chief Information Officer of the United States. At the Carasoft ATO and Cloud Security Summit, he says he's bullish about the future of FedRAMP.
The momentum that we've been building since a little bit before the legislation has passed, we're really optimistic about in three key areas. One is the pivot of the board to more like what you would think of as like a commercial functioning board or a governmental board that sets strategy, outlines like where we need to go as policy, setting metrics for success, and then being transparent with all of our key stakeholders, as well as building momentum and excitement within the agencies around how to implement like presumption of adequacy, increasing reuse, and adoption of more FedRAMP products.
The pivot of the board, how do you see that producing a better/different result than what we've seen so far?
So previously the board was really focused, and it needed to be, on delivering secure products, like authorizing secure products, because it's been 12 or 13 years since the original board was set up, but we needed a way to bring in IaaS providers. And then we needed a way for agencies to trust that. So the market, while we were developing on those cloud products inside of our agencies, a whole SaaS economy developed, and we have 100,000+ software products that are out there that would fit a lot of our mission needs. And so we needed to pivot from like a very focused on product to how to manage the program better. Mm-hmm. And then so the board's doing that well, and we're getting it stood up. We're continuing with a lot of the knowledge that we had before from DHS, DOD, and GSA. So we have all their CISOs on the board. And then we have some new, great, exciting members from DOD, VA, small agencies, CSPB, and then CISA.
What's your sense of how the difference in the board's makeup will project to the vendors that are going through the FedRAMP process? Will that make any difference to them?
Well, I think so, because as the board members are out and they're educating like their security teams and they're educating other security teams, that's really where vendors meet. You know, the federal government is through the acquisition and this initial security process. So what we're hoping for is like an increase in the culture around like, how do you first off bring in products faster, like leveraging external frameworks, SOC, ISO, like how does that come into your authorization, your ANA, and then also like that trust between agencies. Because even with, you know, when you get a product in, it is very frustrating from their perspective if they get FedRAMP certified in one agency, go to the next agency and have to start over. And so we're seeing the board now as like the guiding lights of how powerful FedRAMP can be.
You said the magic word about FedRAMP when you used the word reuse. Mm-hmm. Dave McClure, when FedRAMP stood up, was on my radio show. It seems like 100 years ago. And that was the main point that he made. This is an opportunity for federal agencies to have a platform to use the same things that other agencies are using. Why do you think we got so far away from that? And what do you see as the way to bring people back to that? How much of that is just educating agencies? You don't have to create your own thing anymore because this is already available to you.
There are a couple things there. It's usually never like a silver bullet in the government, but a bunch of lead bullets. So one of the challenges is there's a high turnover rate in the CISOs and the security teams. So they have to come in and trust what was done by previous CISOs, and then they have to build that trust with other agencies. Like when you're signing as an authorizing official, you're taking responsibility that this system is secure, and that's a heavy responsibility. So that's one aspect. So the like standardizing how people look at that from a security perspective, and you're starting to see people peer at different agencies or go through different agencies. Amber Pearson was at FEMA and now she's at VA. So she brings those best practices from agency to agency. Another thing is just like the sheer volume of paperwork. So most of the controls and the authorization documentation is in flat files and Word. we're moving to OSCAL. Like that's a standard that NIST put out that we really feel will help like all the security artifacts become more machine readable. So when instead of getting a 500-page document, you'll get, you know, a JSON file and you can import it. So that's going to make it much easier and a higher level of confidence. And then I think just the third thing is people are more focused from a vendor perspective of building secure by design. They understand our frameworks better. They're building them from the beginning. So when they come in, they're already understanding the language of the federal government and how we look and what frameworks we leverage. And that enables them to build trust quicker.
You were on stage here and you talked about community engagement. Who's the community? Is it just the dialogue between government and industry, or is the community, in your view, broader than that?
Much broader. So we see the community as like the developers that are out there building like the next generation of products. We see it as the companies that help, like the 3PAOs, and then the resellers of companies, like helping them explain the gauntlet that they have to go through to get into the federal government. We see it as the FedRAMP PMO and the FedRAMP board, the technical advisory group, and the Federal Secure Cloud board, the FISCAC, as well as the agencies, primarily like who are users of those, like are beneficiaries of those, like the work that they're doing. And then lastly, it's the mission, people that are driving mission, running public benefits programs that are delivering key services to the public every day. Like they need to know that like they can get the best tools and that their security teams are tied hip to hip with them on delivering those tools quickly.
Broadly among those categories, not specific organizations or individuals, who among those groups is already pretty engaged in that community, and who would you like to see participate more?
Well, it's definitely on two sides. I'll highlight. One is like the more that industry adopts OSCAL and is able to send us documentation and their security authorizations in that format, machine readable format, then we can push it to agencies and help bring them up the curve of like adopting OSCAL. So those, like we see that as a huge point of friction that we can reduce. So once an agency is able to like ingest that authorization package quickly and effectively and trust it, and they have the security SMEs that are able to like find any concerns or vulnerabilities they have and then like work on those. What we think, and we'll see hopefully both a time shift, but also a drastic reduction in the cost. So if you're a smaller agency that is budget, and we're in a resource constrained environment and will be for a long time, big agency or small agency, whenever you can reduce that cost of bringing a new product from probably over $1 million to tens of thousands of dollars, and somebody, you know, as a community is like absorbing the continuous monitoring costs and the vulnerabilities, like everybody gains in the federal government.
The vendors are going to tell you, I'm sure, though, that if you can cut our costs in going through the FedRAMP process, then we can cut our costs in what we have to charge the government. Is that a factor in any of the decision making that's going on?
Absolutely. We understand that in the past, one of the challenges we've had is like because of our frameworks, we've made companies have two versions of their software, and usually the government version is less secure and has less features. So that's a major cost because you have two engineering teams and you have to maintain like almost two companies delivering products. So the more that we can reduce that, the better. And also like the fewer number of like manual touch points with the government that aren't automated, you have to put engineers, you have to put compliance people to each of those. So cost is a huge factor for us, and timing are the two of the biggest drivers for us.
All right, we have about a minute left, Drew. You talked about the importance of people moving from agency to agency and then propagating the importance of FedRAMP in their new positions. You essentially have done the same thing, moving from VA to OMB. What role do you think you can play personally in pushing that concept out to the agencies about the importance of reuse?
Well, so one of the things that we do is I just go meet them. And I spend a lot of time in our road shows. Claire Monteron, our Federal CIO, brought me in because of my agency experience. She felt like that was an attribute. And so I spend a lot of my time meeting with the agencies, like understanding their pain points, understanding where like we can help from OMB, either in a policy perspective or a budget perspective, and then taking that back to OMB, and then also like helping them introduce them to other agencies, because as we build that supply chain of trust and from a product coming in until it's utilized at multiple agencies, you can see like through there's a consistent supply chain. So I look at my responsibility as like increasing that speed and that ability to get through that process as fast as possible by linking people together and building that trust.
Drew Myklegard of OMB. You can read more about the new FedRAMP roadmap and find a link to it on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com, and you'll learn more about it from GSA's Eric Mill later in the program. Up next, the keys to success for your agency's cyber future. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Chris Stuntz of Equinix on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carahsoft.
A few years ago when CSP, cloud became the buzzword, everyone was migrating to the cloud. And then due to cost and everything else, they're kind of coming back a little bit on that. So they want to either do their own data center and or use vendors like us, third-party vendors, or they want to do a hybrid approach. So keep stuff on site, on-prem, cloud, a little bit of both. So everyone has their own security for that. So cloud providers have theirs, data centers have theirs, and then their own facility and government regulations. So it makes it more complex.
Mm-hmm. For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. You heard Drew Myklegard discuss the new FedRAMP roadmap a moment ago. Government IT leaders say the point of the new roadmap is not to have new guidance, it's to make cloud computing more secure. David Kubicki is Solution Architect Manager for Federal at Palo Alto Networks. At the Carahsoft ATO and Cloud Security Summit, he tells me several important factors exist around securing cloud environments.
One of the ones I like to focus on is it's not always a technology problem. I think it's very much a human problem. And what I mean by that is that there's this push and pull as far as aligning priorities between security organizations and their development organizations. And I like to use the analogy, everybody wants to go home at 5. And most of us in IT don't get to go home quite that early all the time. But the priorities of the developer and the priorities of the security professional are a lot different. The developer wants to get that latest update, release, fix, whatever the case is out, right? And wants to do it in a way that's not impeding their goaling, right? So that they can get home at 5. And a lot of times they view security as that gate, but let's be honest, security is supposed to be a barrier. It's supposed to be a gate, right? But how can we make it so that it's easier? So if you use the lock and the door analogy, I have a nice, code that I can get through that makes it easier because I don't have to have a key or whatever the case is, right? So how can I make it more frictionless so that everybody can get what they want? That security professional can go home at 5 because they know that they're adhering to compliance frameworks, to government or governance, kind of capabilities, that they're burning down the issues that they're seeing within their environment, and then how can that developer release that code most efficiently and have that information so that they can be releasing that most secure code. So that's the human problem that I'm mentioning. And then secondarily, I think it's not falling into the same trap that we have maybe historically of throwing a point tool at something. Having a platform-based approach provides much better security. And also provides you the visibility to look at a workload regardless of the modality of that workload, where it might reside or where it is in its application lifecycle, and provide that visibility. And that visibility across the entire spectrum of the lifecycle allows you to respond and remediate in a much more efficient manner. Mm-hmm. So if you have that information, that security personnel can keep up with the application velocity that you see increasing in most environments, and remediate very quickly.
I think it's interesting that you went to the security and developer tension rather than the security and end user tension that a lot of agencies talk about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's especially prevalent. We just released a recent cloud security threat report, and one of the things that I thought was most interesting was that the majority of the respondents wanted something easier for security and not easier for development, which is kind of alluding to that kind of mismatch of priorities, right? I would advocate that it should be easier for both. And you should provide that information to developers and the tools that they're most accustomed to using, and also provide that visibility to security so that they can do the activities that they need within their line of work.
We have about a minute left, David. How does one measure for success in this area? How does one know that one is on the right track to getting to the end state, which is not compliance or complying with governance. It's securing systems and making sure that the systems and the data are secure.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll be honest with you. I think it depends. I also think that the North Star, as far as success is moving, or constantly shifting, especially with as organizations start to move more into the cloud, or start to get into refactoring as opposed to lifting and shifting, or to start developing in more cloud native kind of methodologies, it will shift. So depending on where you are in your journey, in a lift and shift kind of world, you might just want visibility, or that would be the thing that you would want to do, right? And as you start to move more into cloud native development, refactoring, then you can start getting into the shifting left kind of conversation that I'm sure everybody is aware of, but also making sure that you're shielding right as well. So I think that idea of success is constantly moving, which unfortunately in IT that's usually the norm. But I think ultimately, making sure you're investing in technology that allows to grow with you is arguably maybe one of the keys to success.
David Kubicki of Palo Alto Networks. You can read more about securing the cloud on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the roadmap for tomorrow for FedRAMP. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
You'll take a deep dive into the cutting-edge world of cybersecurity on Innovation in Government from TechNet Cyber, available now on demand at innovationingov.com. You'll see exclusive conversations with top cyber leaders from DISA, the DoD Office of the Chief Information Officer, and industry experts, all sharing their insights from AFCEA's TechNet Cyber. Discover how these leaders are outpacing threats and securing the DoD's digital future. Don't miss this unique opportunity. Innovation in Government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carahsoft. Available now on demand at innovationingov.com.
Welcome back. Two major developments are behind the new FedRAMP roadmap you've learned about on this show. One is Congress codifying FedRAMP into law in 2022. The other's the Office of Management and Budget's draft guidance on FedRAMP last year. Eric Mills, Executive Director for Cloud Strategy at GSA. At the Carahsoft ATO and Cloud Security Summit, I asked him why the release of the new roadmap is so important now.
It was very important for us as GSA, as FedRAMP, to show our thinking, our plan, how we believe we can respond to what are pretty well-known stakeholder concerns in the FedRAMP space. I mean, there's time, there's cost, but then there's also places in which people can just come away from the FedRAMP program feeling like, did that make sense? Like, did we have to do it that way? We're a program where we take a lot of the things that have been designed with the federal government in mind from a security perspective. We try to really just apply it out in the cloud and the private sector usually. And so we are where the rubber meets the road. And so we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up very publicly and able to have a theory of change that people can see and reason about for how we're going to address those. And what I do often say to cloud providers, agencies, and others about this is what you can do with this is look at that and think about how to engage with us. We're sharing here, here's what our priorities are, here's what our motivations are, right? And so if there are ideas that have just been sitting on the back burner, or there's somebody in your agency who's just been had this FedRAMP project and collaboration they've wanted to do for a while, and they just haven't been able to get it onto the front burner, maybe now's the time. Right, and we are as we might talk about, also opening up opportunities very directly for cloud providers to come work with us, participate in pilots. We released one this week, and so we think we're providing a whole lot of hooks for cloud providers and agencies to get involved.
There are 4 goals that you and your colleagues GSA write about in this roadmap: orienting around the customer experience, cybersecurity leadership, scaling a trusted marketplace, smarter technology-forward operations. And then you write about specific initiatives that you're undertaking. One of those I wanted to ask you about is publishing new customer-oriented program metrics. What will those metrics include, And what are you measuring essentially with those metrics?
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. We think it's very important that our metrics provide the right incentives for the program. They reflect both the things that are in our control, right? The things that we could put SLAs, kind of where people think of them as service level agreements. Like, what are the things where our processes we can just operate them tightly? They're in our control. But then there's the other half of the equation, which is, what are the impacts that FedRAMP is having on the overall time and cost that people experience when working with it, even in parts of the program that are where there's many people involved and it's a little harder to predict how things will go. That's a tricky problem. So one of the ways we're going to handle that is, and what you'll see from us is we're going to publish a whole suite of proposed metrics with different trade-offs for how we might go about doing this and how we might measure them. So we're going to seek public comment on those things. Hopefully you should see those coming out a little bit later this month. But what we want to do is make sure that we have some kind of feedback loop with the outside world, right? With the impacts that our processes and our policies have on the customers of the program. And I think that has been missing a little bit in how the program is measured, and that's an element we want to make sure is present.
Another important development happening concurrently with the new roadmap is the Emerging Technology Prioritization Framework. And I was struck by the coverage around this. A lot of people that wrote about this are talking about it on LinkedIn and other places, are reflecting the artificial intelligence content in this. But I note there's a passage in here that you specifically write that it's not only about AI. Why do you think people are missing that? Is it just because AI is hot right now? Is there some other factor? And why was it important for you to point out this framework is not just about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and these don't have to be in competition with each other. AI is, of course, very important right now. There's a lot of focus on it. The Emerging Technology Framework was also developed in response to a tasking in the Artificial Intelligence Executive Order. So that's all understandable, and we care quite a bit about that and want to make sure we are doing our part to help make sure the federal government has these tools available to them. But it is very important to us that it be understood, and whether people notice that now or notice that later, it's very important for us to establish this as a more general prioritization framework, because there are more things out there than artificial intelligence that either now or in the future will make sense for us to prioritize. I think one thing I've said about this is that FedRAMP hasn't really had any prioritization framework at all up to this point. It's run more or less as a first in, first out kind of model. And that's very important from a fairness perspective, predictability, consistency. But what that is missing, if that's all you ever do, is just the ability to focus the program on what the government needs at the moment. And that's something that most government programs have some ability to do. And when you have something like an executive order or a law or these things that are meant to pull the government together towards a common goal, we don't think artificial intelligence is going to be the last time that ever happens.
Sure. And to that end, you mentioned a moment ago that this reflects what's happening now and in the future. And that was my takeaway from it, is that this is intended to be something that lasts for a long time and not just solve a problem today.
We put in quite a bit of effort into this with that in mind, that this is going to be how we operationalize prioritization going forward.
How did you consider what the possibilities of technology in the future are in order to do that? Or doesn't that matter? Is it more about the technique by which one evaluates whatever it is that comes down the pike?
Yeah, there's going to be specific things for each technology in it. Certainly, quite a bit of the work that we did in the draft and the final was AI specific to ascertain what's a reasonable way to make sure that we are, in fact, prioritizing new generative AI that meets what is asked for and isn't the sort of AI or machine learning and other things that have actually been around for quite some time. We do anticipate a lot of folks are going to apply to this and participate. We need to measure, like, is this the thing that we're targeting? But we don't want to do that in such a way that it gets capricious, or we're starting to just set like a nebulous quality bar. We're not trying to measure that. We are trying to make sure we're prioritizing the right kinds of things. So, one of our changes in the final was moving away from sort of benchmarks from third parties and moving towards taking in model cards that are industry standard. So for other emerging, other technologies in the future that we prioritize, there's going to be something that is specific to that technology that we'll have to reason about just the same. And that's what we did for AI.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but we talked before we turned the cameras on about the way that you will try to find the people that you need to fill this in. You were very passionate about that aspect of all of this. What does that look like from your perspective? Where do you go to find these people? What do you want the people who will be executing on these visions, not just for GSA, but all across the government? What will they be doing, and where do you expect to go find them?
Yeah, appreciate that. We are overall working very hard to just expand the capacity of the FedRAMP ecosystem to operate and to scale. Some of that is not hiring. Some of that's, partnering with DISA and other agencies that have, mature authorization process to harness their energy. But a big part of that is hiring. We were very happy to show up to the most recent Tech to Gov hiring fair that OPM hosted a couple months ago. It was AI focused, and we had a couple of positions open for folks with backgrounds in data science and machine learning, for our automation infrastructure and for how we just get insights from the security information we have. We are in the final stages of hiring a FedRAMP director, and we are not done. There's going to be more positions that we have coming. For those who follow how our agency does hiring, join.tts.gsa.gov is where we put up postings ahead of time, where we put up, here's what the position's going to be, and you can sign up for alerts. It ultimately all goes through USA Jobs, but we go out of our way to try to give a lot of advance notice and information to applicants, and we'll have more to come.
Eric Mill of GSA. You can read more about the new FedRAMP roadmap and find a link to it on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment.
Here's Gina Cinta of Thales Trusted Cyber Technologies on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carasoft.
Security of AI really is just another data use case, but you've got to know what you want to protect. And as you get more granular in what you're analyzing, that's when it becomes more sensitive, because then they'll know what you're looking for, right? And there's such a large volume of data. Not all data can be ingested into AI the way it is today, right? Whereas from a data protection standpoint, data today, whether it's unstructured in a file or a Excel spreadsheet or PDF or something, that can be encrypted today, no problem, or a database, right? But when you have to normalize that data in a way that it can be put into AI, then you're going to have to encrypt it again, right? So that it fits into the models that you're forming within the AI structure.
For more, go to innovationingov.com.
FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Stacey Dixon, and David Shive, the Chief Information Officer at GSA. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you next Sunday. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.